My name is Captain Alex Harding. I'm 40 years old, a military intelligence officer with the United States Army, and I've spent the last 15 years of my life serving my country, enduring deployments to some of the world's most dangerous conflict zones, places that tested not only my physical endurance, but also my mental resilience and emotional stability. In 2025, I was deployed to an advanced operations base in the Middle East, right at the epicenter of the escalating Iran conflict. The situation was volatile beyond measure, with the United States intensifying its presence to support our Israeli allies after Iran launched devastating missile and drone attacks. Every day brought new challenges, new dangers, and a kind of tension that demanded every ounce of my training and discipline. Yet, in the middle of all this chaos, there was one constant I clung to, the image of my wife, Michelle Harding, waiting for me at home. She was my anchor, the one reason I believed I could always return from each mission whole. Or at least, that's what I told myself. Michelle and I had been married for 12 years. She was 38, a marketing manager for a tech company in San Diego, and she had always presented herself as unwaveringly supportive of my service, even though I now realize much of that support may have been more of a masked than genuine devotion. My very nature is one of careful observation and calculated risk analysis. I'm a man who prefers to watch before acting, to weigh outcomes before making a move, and it's a trait that saved my life countless times on the battlefield. What I didn't realize then was that this same instinct would be just as vital at home. During the months leading up to my deployment, I began noticing small but undeniable changes in Michelle. She started asking unusual questions about my finances, particularly about the offshore investments I had quietly built over the years, subjects she had never cared about before. Her tone also grew colder, her words delivered with a calculated precision that made me feel more like a subject in an interrogation than her husband. I convinced myself it was just the stress of another deployment weighing on her, but ignoring those signs was a mistake that would soon cost me dearly. At the base, my days were consumed with intelligent analysis, coordination with allied forces, and endless briefings about the rapidly escalating situation between Iran and Israel. Iranian missiles rained down, American forces responded with devastating strikes, and the entire region trembled on the edge of catastrophe. In the suffocating environment, personal messages from home were rare treasures, a momentary lifeline to something human beyond the battlefield. So when I received a message from Michelle on my encrypted device one evening, I felt a rush of relief. I thought it would be the comfort I desperately needed, a reminder of love and stability. Instead, what I read nearly knocked the breath from my chest. Alex, I want a divorce. My lawyer will be in touch. Don't try to talk me out of it. I stared at the screen, reading those words again and again, hoping they would change, that I had somehow misunderstood, but the brutal finality of the message remained the same. The betrayal struck me harder than any enemy fire ever had. It wasn't just a collapse of a marriage. It was a cold, calculated abandonment delivered at the very moment I was most vulnerable, risking my life in service to a nation while the one person I trusted above all others severed the bond we shared without hesitation or explanation. Yet instead of exploding in anger or drowning in despair, my mind, conditioned to survive chaos, shifted into icy clarity. Something about the message didn't align with the Michelle I thought I knew. She wasn't impulsive. She planned. She measured. And if she was doing this, then there had to be more beneath the surface. My intuition screamed at me, the same intuition that saved me countless times in combat, that this wasn't just about a marriage falling apart. That night, as artillery rumbled in the distance and alerts of incoming attacks echoed through the base, I replayed every moment from the months before I left. The strange questions about my finances, the subtle emotional distance, the timing of this message hitting when I couldn't possibly return home. Slowly, a more disturbing picture began to form, one that suggested Michelle wasn't acting alone. A name came to mind with increasing clarity: Mark Sullivan. He was a former colleague of hers, a financial consultant she often mentioned casually, perhaps too casually, in conversations before my deployment. She had said he was smart with investments, even hinted I should meet him about diversifying my portfolio. At the time, I thought she was just being thoughtful, but now, with new eyes, I saw those words as carefully placed pieces in a larger scheme. Mark was 35, divorced, and ambitious, and his sudden prominence in Michelle's conversations now felt anything but accidental. Luckily, years of service had taught me to prepare for worst-case scenarios. Before deploying, I always safeguarded my personal and financial assets, not out of distrust, but as a precaution ingrained in military security culture. I had mirrored all essential documents to a secure server only I could access, and I had set up automated alerts for unusual financial activities. 3 days after Michelle's message, the first alerts arrived, funds being quietly siphoned from our joint accounts into accounts I didn't recognize. The amounts were small, spread out over several days, an attempt to avoid detection, but as someone trained in intelligence patterns, the deception was glaring. That's when I reached out to Samuel Thorne, my lawyer and trusted ally for over a decade, a Gulf War veteran himself. Sam understood both the unique challenges of active-duty soldiers and the ruthless tactics people sometimes use against them. Connecting to a secure channel, I laid it out plainly. Sam, Michelle's asking for a divorce, but I think there's more to it. There are financial movements that don't add up. I need you to watch closely. His response was immediate, his tone firm with understanding. Do you want me to freeze the accounts now, Alex? I paused, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. Not yet. I need to know exactly what's happening and who's pulling the strings. Only freeze if the transfers accelerate, I told Sam. My voice steady though my chest burned with restrained anger, and I also need someone specialized in financial forensic investigation, someone who can uncover the layers beneath this deception. That was how I met Dr. Lena Petrova, recommended by Samuel as one of the most brilliant specialists in financial risk analysis and cybersecurity on the West Coast. She was 36, Ukrainian-born but a naturalized American, with a Ph.D. in applied mathematics from Stanford and a career built on dismantling high-profile corporate fraud schemes. Our first secure video conference took place at dawn in the Middle East. The desert sky still painted in shades of pale orange as the sun struggled to rise through the haze of dust and smoke. Lena was sharp, direct, and pragmatic, qualities I respected immediately. Captain Harding, I've analyzed the preliminary data your lawyer provided, she began, her calm voice firm, her green eyes locked on the screen with unnerving focus. The transfer pattern is consistent with small-scale money laundering. Whoever is behind this is deliberately fragmenting the amounts to conceal the true destination. Can you track where the money is going? I asked, my tone measured. I can and I will, she replied, but I'll also need full access to all recoverable communication logs, emails, messages, call history. If this is a conspiracy, the digital footprints will expose it. Over the following 2 weeks, as I balanced grueling military duties in a region on the brink of full-scale war, Lena worked relentlessly, sending me encrypted reports that peeled back the layers of betrayal like knives cutting through flesh. The funds were being funneled into a maze of offshore accounts hidden behind shell companies. But the most damning discovery came when she recovered email metadata between Michelle and Mark. The exchanges began innocently about 6 months before my deployment, on the guise of investment discussions, but quickly darkened into coded talk about windows of opportunity and leveraging temporary situations. One email chilled me to the core. Mark wrote, his deployment is the perfect opportunity. He won't be able to interfere or monitor anything for at least 6 months. We can structure it all to look like legitimate divorce expenses. Michelle's reply was a knife to the gut. Alex has always been overconfident in his intelligence. He'll never suspect until it's too late. And even if he does, he'll be too far away to stop us. Hearing my wife's words twisted into such cold calculation was worse than any battlefield injury. Lena continued uncovering Mark's elaborate scheme. He had built a fictitious investment consultancy, registered multiple LLCs in states notorious for financial secrecy, and woven a network of accounts designed specifically to obscure the origin and destination of stolen funds. The plan was cunning but disturbingly simple. Use the divorce filing as a smokescreen to siphon away the bulk of my assets, while I was too consumed by war and grief to notice. In one of our briefings, Lena's voice was steady but grave. Captain, this was not born from passion or impulse. This is premeditated financial theft disguised as a marital collapse. I sat silently, fury controlled but simmering, my respect for Lena's precision matched only by my disgust at the betrayal. My wife and her lover weren't just conspiring behind my back. They were orchestrating a heist against me while I stood on the front lines of a war. What's our next move? I asked quietly. We already have enough for legal action, Lena explained, but they're accelerating. If we gather just a little more evidence, we can hit them with simultaneous strikes, asset freezes, court injunctions, and a criminal complaint for fraud. The plan resonated deeply with me. It was a kind of operation I understood intimately. Precise timing, coordinated execution, information as a weapon. Michelle and Mark thought they were exploiting a broken soldier drowning in betrayal. They had no idea they were facing a military intelligence officer, armed with expertise, patience, and allies. The irony was almost poetic. While they celebrated their cleverness, I was building a counter-operation designed to ensnare them with their own evidence. Lena's final report outlined a critical timeline. They're planning to accelerate the transfers next week, she revealed in our fourth video conference. Her tone sharper now. Mark is pushing Michelle to finalize what he calls Phase 1 before you could possibly return. I leaned forward. Phase 1. The transfer of 60% of your liquid assets into offshore accounts, she explained. I intercepted a call where Mark said verbatim, after Phase 1, even if he finds out, it'll be too late to recover the money. That was the moment I knew it was time to act. I convened a secure three-way call with Samuel and Lena, my voice carrying the same authority I used to command field operations. We have green light for execution, I declared. Samuel, all judicial measures must be filed simultaneously tomorrow at 9 a.m. California time. Lena, prepare a comprehensive evidence dossier to accompany the filings. Samuel's reply was crisp. Understood. I'll request immediate freezing of joint accounts, injunctions against transfers, and protective measures due to suspected fraud. Lena added firmly, I'll compile a forensic dossier, including transfer tracking, email metadata, and a complete shell company map. And so, with the precision of a military strike, Operation Countermeasure was launched. At 9:15 a.m. on Tuesday, while I sat in a tense operational briefing in the Middle East, Samuel stood before the San Diego Superior Court, presenting a stack of meticulously prepared documents that represented weeks of investigation, betrayal, and a soldier's unwavering resolve to turn the enemy's deception into their downfall. The results were immediate and precise, almost like watching a domino chain fall exactly as planned. By 10:30 a.m., every joint account was frozen solid. By 11, banking authorities have been formally alerted about the suspicious transfers, their systems locking down further access. By 11:30, the FBI had opened a formal criminal investigation into financial crimes tied directly to Michelle and Mark. Lena kept me informed in real time, her encrypted updates cutting through the chaos of my surroundings with surgical clarity. Primary target attempted to access offshore account at 11:45. Access denied. Repeated attempts being recorded as additional evidence. She reported calmly, almost clinically, yet I could sense a trace of satisfaction beneath her professionalism. Michelle's reaction came exactly as I expected from someone who had been blindsided in her own game. At 1 p.m. local time, my secure line rang. I was on a short break between high-level meetings and decided to answer. Alex, what the hell did you do? Her voice trembled with a mix of panic and anger, tones I had never heard from her before. I kept my composure. Hi, Michelle. How are things over there? I asked, my voice deliberately calm, almost attached. Don't play dumb. All our accounts are blocked, and federal investigators are asking me questions about my finances. I imagine that's inconvenient. I replied evenly. She snapped. Inconvenient? Alex, have you lost your mind? I just want a civilized divorce. I let the silence stretch for a moment, then spoke with deliberate weight. Civilized? Michelle, transferring $180,000 from our joint accounts to shell companies controlled by your boyfriend is exactly what I call civilized. The silence that followed was heavy, lasting nearly 15 seconds. When she finally spoke, the sharpness in her tone had vanished, replaced by something much more revealing. Fear. I don't know what you're talking about. Of course you do. And Mark Sullivan knows too. How's he handling the federal investigation? She hung up instantly, but I didn't need her answer. Lena was already monitoring their communications under judicial authorization, and the unraveling was almost predictable. The messages between Michelle and Mark over the next few hours were a masterclass in panic and self-destruction. Mark's text grew frantic. "We need to talk now. How'd he find the offshore accounts? You said he was just a dumb soldier. They have everything, Michelle. Everything." Michelle, on the other hand, immediately tried to shift blame and distance herself. "You promised the plan was foolproof. I never asked you to set up shell companies. You said there were no risks." Lena followed it all with what she described as professional fascination. "Captain, they're dismantling themselves in real time. Every panic message creates another layer of evidence against them." And then came the most pathetic attempt of all. Mark, desperate and cornered, tried to call me directly. I was in an operational briefing and couldn't answer, but he left a voicemail, which Samuel later obtained as evidence. His voice cracked with fear. "Alex, man, look, I know this all looks bad, but I can explain. Michelle, she seduced me. She said you guys were already falling apart. I didn't want to hurt anyone. We can work this out like civilized men. No need to involve the feds." When I finally heard it, I let out a dry, bitter laugh. Mark was trying to pit me against Michelle, while Michelle was already scrambling to pin everything on him. Exactly the collapse Lena had predicted. People in panic always make the same mistakes. She told me during our first call. They throw each other on the bus, thinking it'll save them, but all it does is hand us more evidence. 2 days after the operation began, Samuel called me with news that almost made me smile for the first time in weeks. "Alex, you need to hear this," he said, his voice tinged with satisfaction. Michelle and Mark had met to coordinate their stories. Unaware the FBI was already monitoring their conversation. The recording was damning. Mark suggested blaming me for emotional abandonment and claiming the transfers were fair compensation for years of absence. Michelle snapped back, calling him an idiot and mocking him for setting up a scheme that looked straight out of mafia film. They had turned completely on each other. Mark was already trying to strike a deal with the DA to reduce his sentence by testifying against Michelle while she had hired a defense attorney and claimed she had been manipulated by him from the start. The conspiracy was collapsing exactly as expected. But Lena wasn't done. She had prepared what she called a mercy stroke. "Captain, I not only traced the money they stole from you," she explained, her voice calm but laced with steel. "I discovered this wasn't their first heist. Mark has run similar schemes on at least 2 other divorcees in the past 3 years. Do you have proof?" I asked sharply. "Yes, and I've already turned it over to the FBI. This changes everything. It's no longer just spousal betrayal. It's organized criminal fraud, multiple victims, a pattern of predation. Their sentences will be far more severe. While I remain deployed in the Middle East, still balancing my military duties amid a volatile crisis, Michelle and Mark were learning the hard way that betraying a military intelligence officer had been the gravest mistake of their lives. And they didn't even know the worst was yet to come. 3 months later, when my deployment finally ended, I returned to the United States ready to face the real battle. Samuel met me at San Diego Airport with a folder full of updates, his expression equal parts grim and satisfied. "Alex, everything changed while you were gone. The case escalated into a large-scale federal investigation. During the drive, he briefed me on the latest developments. Michelle and Mark had been indicted on 15 criminal charges: wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy to commit financial crimes. And the FBI had uncovered ties to an even broader network. Lena had discovered connections to cases in Nevada and Arizona. Mark wasn't just some amateur scammer, Samuel explained. He built a system. He targeted deployed military personnel systematically, using their wives or partners as points of vulnerability. I listened in silence, the weight of it sinking in. My betrayal hadn't been personal. It was calculated, cold, systematic. The following day, I finally met Lena in person at her office in La Jolla. She was even more formidable face-to-face than over the encrypted calls. Her green eyes burned with intensity, the gaze of someone who lived to dismantle deception. She shook my hand firmly. "Captain Harding, a pleasure to finally meet in person. I hope you're ready for some revelations." She walked me through a detailed presentation mapping out Mark's methods. identify high-ranking military personnel on deployment, approach their spouses through professional networks, offer free financial consulting, then seduce them both financially and emotionally. The FBI had tied him to at least 8 victims over 5 years, with an estimated $2.3 million stolen. Divorce was the cover, gradual transfers the method, offshore accounts the destination. Your wife wasn't the first Michelle in his life, Lena said with grim irony. He had a very specific type. Wives of military men with money to lose and loyalty to betray. Weeks passed, and I followed the trial with the same discipline I use in missions. Michelle tried every defense, neglected wife syndrome, manipulation by Mark, but none of it mattered. The evidence Lena gathered was airtight. Emails, bank logs, phone recordings, shell company registries. The trial was nothing short of a public implosion. Michelle and Mark, once united, now tore each other apart in front of court. Michelle painted Mark as a manipulative predator. Mark insisted Michelle masterminded everything. The prosecutor barely needed to argue. Lena's evidence spoke louder than anything else. On a cold November morning, judgment came. Michelle received 8 years in federal prison with full restitution. Mark received 12, along with forfeiture of assets and restitution to all victims. When I walked out of the courthouse that day, the closure hit me harder than expected. It wasn't triumph. It was a deep, steady satisfaction of knowing justice had prevailed. But the true victory came later. Lena and I joined forces, founding Petrova Harding Security Consulting, blending my military intelligence experience with her expertise in financial security. Our mission: protect military families from the very schemes that had almost destroyed me. Within a year, we had prevented over 15 fraud attempts, recovered nearly $800,000 for past victims, and built security protocols that the Department of Defense officially adopted. Lena and I married the following spring in a quiet ceremony on Coronado Beach, Samuel standing proudly as my best man. Our honeymoon wasn't a tropical escape, but a cybersecurity conference in Austin, where we presented our model for protecting military families. 5 years later, I received a letter from Michelle. She had been released early after serving 6 years, now working in a supermarket in Nevada, her reputation in ruins. The letter was filled with apologies and pleas for forgiveness. I never answered, not out of hatred, but because I had learned something vital. True revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about building something greater than they ever believed you could. Mark still rots in prison. Michelle lives a hollow life of regret. But me? I built a company, married an extraordinary woman, and turned my most painful betrayal into my greatest purpose. The real victory wasn't their punishment. It was waking up every morning beside Lena, knowing I had chosen protect instead of destroy, to build instead of burn, and that my integrity was worth infinitely more than any money they thought they could steal.